we this morning? Hey, you're the best. That's because you got to sleep in. Hey, my name is Dan. I get to be our student pastor here at Christ Church Camden, and I love it. And I'm so thankful that I get to call that my job, and thankful I get to be a part of what God is doing here. And I'm excited to get to hang out with you all this morning and speak. I missed last week. I wasn't in church for good reason, but it's just weird when you miss something so routine. I don't think I knew like what day of the week it was or what time it was or what I was supposed to be doing till like Wednesday night. It threw me off for my whole week, and I missed y'all. But I missed it for good reason. We were at last weekend the winter retreat, our first ever high school winter retreat. We took about 40 high school students to Epworth by the Sea on St. Simon's Island, which is the same place we do our summer camp. In case you're wondering, if you have a student, it's July 7th to 11th. The registration opens March 5th, but that's for another time. But hey, we love camp, and camp is really cool. It's the same place, but it's just like, camp is jam-packed. It's busy, it's hot because it's July in southeast Georgia, so there's a lot of sweat. It's high energy, there's just a lot more going on. And with this retreat last weekend, we tried to lean into the vibe of like the retreat. We tried to actually lean into that a little bit and slow down a little bit, and kind of like, we took a smaller group. The goal was to be a little bit calmer. We even warned the students, like, hey, we're going to purposely slow down, which is weird because we don't slow down much in our lives these days. We're just go, 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 especially when you got a jam-packed high school schedule. And so it was really cool, though, to lean in a little bit deeper into God's Word, to lean in a little bit deeper into small groups and those relationships. And we kind of spent a weekend just calling students to something, reminding them that God has given them something incredible to be used for Him. And so it was really cool. In case you don't know, if you have a high school student who went, your high schoolers are amazing. I love them. They're so cool. If you see one, ask them how the weekend went. And I'm really excited to see what God's going to do through them and in them as time just keeps going and as they lead and as they do really cool things for Him. So that's last weekend, though. You ready for this weekend? You ready to talk about the kingdom? In John's words, we're going to do it anyway, so it's fine. Hey, Jesus talks a lot about His kingdom, about what that means, what it looks like. And nowadays, the word kingdom is a weird, we have kingdoms, but we don't call them that anymore. So we want to kind of work through for however many weeks, 10, work through what does it mean when Jesus repeatedly calls this thing the kingdom of heaven or His kingdom. And we're working with this definition of the kingdom, right? The kingdom is anywhere that God, the King, rules and reigns in heaven and on earth and in the human heart. It is here, now, available to anyone, and yet is still to come when the resurrected Jesus returns and makes it complete. In the meantime, Jesus has left a church to keep building this kingdom. God's people in God's place, living under God's rule and blessing. And last week, John started into Matthew chapter 5, which we would call the Sermon on the Mount, right? It is Jesus' longest recorded and probably the greatest teaching we get to see in the Gospels. It's Jesus telling people about this new thing. John called it like a kingdom manifesto last week, that Jesus is telling people about this new thing that He is ushering in. And in this new kingdom, everything is different. And He starts with who's invited into it. And we saw that last week about who's in the kingdom, what kind of people make up this group in this place. And you have to imagine the crowd He's talking to is sitting there eagerly hoping they're going to get invited in. Or maybe they're expecting to be invited in. But here's the thing about this kingdom that Jesus is ushering in. It's an upside down kind of kingdom. Things are backwards from the way we think they would be. And Jesus takes time to describe the most unimpressive people He could. And then He points to them basically and says, hey, it's yours. Like, you are invited in. These people who thought they had no shot, they're the ones Jesus is singling out to make sure they know they're invited in. And He makes it clear, hey, this kingdom I'm ushering in is for everyone. And He talked about God's approval, right? He made it clear His approval reaches to the lowest of the low. And Jesus was challenging this idea that we often think, hey, if we get all the right things, we'll also get that approval. But at our lowest, we already have God's approval. And this morning, we're going to keep going through Matthew chapter 5, keep going through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and look at that next part. Because the next part, Jesus challenges the idea that if we do all the right things, we'll get that approval. So let's keep working our way through the Sermon on the Mount, the Kingdom Manifesto. Okay, we're going to start in Matthew 5, verse 17 is where we're going to kick off. Matthew 5:17. Jesus continues by saying this, "Don't think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill." So Jesus is bringing this new kingdom, but he makes it clear, hey, he's not just like getting rid of the laws that people have followed for so long. He may be flipping things on their head. He may be doing things upside down or in a backwards way that we would think, but he's not here to like toss everything out the window that they've learned their whole lives. This law, these rules that have been passed from generation to generation, he's not just taking them and chucking them out the window. He's here to fulfill them, to complete them, to help these people fully understand it, it the way that God intended. So then if we jump to verse 20, Jesus continues with this. He says, "For I tell you, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven." Oof, that's a tough line right there. I can almost hear all the people, he just got really excited, like let out a sigh of despair. Like, man, immediately these groups he just talked to, they're like, well, hey, we're out again. You just invited us in and now I'm out. There's no way. Thanks for getting my hopes up. There's no way I can possibly live up to that standard. Righteousness better than the scribes and Pharisees? That's crazy. Like, no one was better. These guys were the best of the best. They were varsity starters and the rest of everybody was playing rec league, okay? No one can be that good. The scribes and Pharisees lived to follow every dot and every detail of every single law. That's what they were known for. They're like extreme devotion to the law of Moses. The many, many, many oral traditions that also came with that. Their very mission was to obey every detail of every law and every command. And I don't know if you know this, but there were like 700 of those, and they followed them all. Like, for instance, they tithed on everything, okay? Like, not just like their salary or like the money they had, they tithed on their herbs and spices. So like the garlic powder they bought at Walmart, they tithed 10%. They followed the Sabbath, okay, which was meant to be a day of rest, something God designed to give us rest, but instead they flipped it on its head and made it more about working to not work. Like, they didn't just rest, they came up with rules about what was work, what wasn't work. So how heavy can I carry something and call it not work? How heavy does something have to be considered work? If I carry it in my right hand, it is work. If I switch hands, it's not work. They have like 39 categories of work, and they followed them all. They avoided the unclean. They followed a strict ritual of like hand washing laws. They fasted twice a week. They had followed strict food laws. They prayed in public multiple times a day. They made rules about the rules to help them keep the rules. And they followed every single law to its technical point and beyond. And they made sure other people knew it, okay? They were not shy about how good they were. They weren't shy about how many rules they followed. They made sure everyone knew how righteous they were by following every law of every rule down to every detail. They thought they were the definition of righteousness. But Jesus is going to help them see themselves for who they really are. He's going to help them understand what real righteousness is, and it's going to be a harsh moment for the Pharisees here. You ever have like a crystallizing moment where you realize I might not be as good as I thought I was at something? I've had many in my life, okay? Mainly probably in the game of basketball. I played basketball my whole life. From the time I was like little, we had a Fisher-Price hoop in one of our rooms, and I played on that all the time. Lots of dunk contests on that bad boy. And then I played in a church league when I was 9 years old. And then I moved to middle school. I played in middle school. And then I moved to high school. And eventually I played in college. And here's the thing. In high school, I was pretty good, okay? I won't lie to you. I was pretty good, all right? I was the best player on my team, okay? You know that person who has like the green light, you can shoot from anywhere, any shot, no shot's a bad shot, do whatever you want. That was me. Like, I just ran around the court, shooting whatever I wanted, doing whatever I wanted, kind of had free range. And to be honest with you, I won every MVP of every tournament and league I was in my senior year. Like, I scored my 1,000 points. I won the league championship game on a game-winning shot from the free throw line. I pulled up and it rattled around a little bit, but it went in. Game-winning shot with seconds left. I won us the championship. I won the MVP. I was pretty good, okay? And then I went to college. And things changed, right? Also, I'm in a bigger pond, okay? There's a lot more fish out there, and they're a lot bigger and stronger and faster than me, okay? I got there as a freshman. I was invited to go play pickup. They played pickup in the gym every Sunday night. The whole team would play pickup. We'd run a bunch of games. We'd invite a few guys to kind of fill it out who weren't that good, but they also weren't that bad, so we just welcomed them in. And I got invited to do that, and I remember I stepped into the corner of that gym, and I can still remember what that gym smells like. You ever have something like that? It makes me kind of sick to my stomach, to be honest with you. I think it's probably the 5 a.m. practices, the amount of times I threw up in that gym. But I step in the gym, and I watch them play for just like a few minutes. And honestly, something shifted. I was scared. Like, they played faster than anyone I had seen play or played with. They were bigger than anyone I had played in high school. They were more physical than anyone I was playing in high school. They were dunking on each other. It was an intimidating thing. And I stood there in the corner, and everything kind of shifted. And all of a sudden, I was like, my mindset went from, I'm going to dominate these dudes, to do not embarrass yourself. Like, the first few runs, I was just out there. Like, I was just like, they passed me the ball. I was like, no, back to you, brother. It's all you. Like, go for it. I avoided the ball. Like, I was just thinking in my head, hey, don't look like an idiot. Don't look dumb. I realized, hey, maybe I'm actually not as good as I thought I was. It kind of crystallized in my head, hey, maybe the reason I dominated everyone in high school was because I went to a small private Christian school and I only played small private Christian schools. And I was taller than everyone. Like, of course I was going to win, okay? That started to settle in. I realized, hey, I am not at the level that I thought I was at here. I did at least avoid being like humiliated, so that's good. There's that. But sometimes we get a bit of a warped reality, and we think we're something we aren't. Then we get clarity, and that can be a tough moment. And for the Pharisees, this harsh realization is settling in, and Jesus is going to take it another step farther. That they are not the definition of success and righteousness that they thought they were. But I mean, what else could someone possibly do to be better than them? For Jesus to say, unless your righteousness is better than theirs in their kingdom, is crazy. I can just picture like the defeated looks on all those normal people being like, well, we have no shot of ever getting there. And I can picture like the anger and the insult and the offense that the Pharisees took, like someone better than us. Are you serious? And Jesus just keeps saying things that are going to keep shocking them. He's telling them the law they're thinking about that had been modeled for them was not really what God had in mind. How they viewed righteousness simply wasn't it. So Jesus takes a minute here to help the crowd understand what he's talking about. What kind of righteousness does he mean? That word righteousness that Jesus keeps saying basically means, hey, the way which man can attain a state approved by God. So how can we as people be approved by God? And to be approved is to be welcomed in his kingdom. And Jesus then describes what it looks like. And this is where the whole like fulfilling the law part comes into play. He's going to help them understand the point of this whole thing. These guys, yes, they were crushing it at following the rules, but their version of righteousness was broken and corrupted. They placed heavy burdens on people. They presented these endless hoops that people had to jump through. It was all about what you do or how you appear or what people thought of you. It wasn't based on faith or the deeper places of your heart. No, it wasn't about what you believed. It was about what you portrayed. And I've seen that, I don't know about you, I've seen that kind of Christianity where the emphasis is all about the outward appearance. It's all about what we do or what we don't do. What we say, what services we attend, what Sunday school classes we lead, what small group we lead, what we wear, how we look, what we portray. Or maybe it's about the things we stay away from, the things we avoid, that we don't do that, we don't go there, we don't own those things, we don't talk to those people, we're better than those Christians at that church. As long as we appear a certain way, we're doing a good job, we're doing well. It's like we seem to think God has a checklist, and as long as the more things we keep checking off, the more loved we are, the more blessed we are. And listen, the kingdom isn't that way. That way is exhausting. And honestly, like the Pharisees, no matter how much we do, no matter how much we say, no matter what we portray, we will never measure up to this righteousness and this standard that Jesus is making clear. So Jesus dives into what kind of righteousness he is talking about. What does he really mean? And for the rest of the chapter, Jesus looks back on what these people would have been taught their whole life. And he starts each section with this, hey, you have heard it said, and then he says something. And he's referring to this Old Testament law that they believed, hey, if I do this or, don't do this, they were righteous. But man, they were missing it. Old Testament laws were like guardrails, right? They were there to keep us from falling off the cliff into destruction, but just not hitting the guardrails wasn't enough to be righteous. So after Jesus tells them how they had learned it, he's going to fulfill it by saying, hey, but I tell you, and give them the new right way of living in his kingdom. It's not that Jesus was getting rid of the law, but rather giving the fuller understanding of the law. What does it look like to live in this kingdom? A fuller understanding of maybe what God meant and intended in the first place. And he does not avoid the tough topics, honestly. He dives right into the real topics of life. He hits on anger and hatred and lust, divorce, manipulation, revenge. And he gives real, tangible examples. So let's check it out. Matthew 5, verse 21. Jesus continues with this. You have heard that it was said to our ancestors, do not murder. And whoever murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, Everyone who is angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Whoever insults his brother or sister will be subject to the court. Whoever says, "You fool," will be subject to hellfire. So he starts with a pretty easy law to keep, okay? Don't murder. Yes, that is a good thing. I'm guessing most people in the crowd probably hadn't murdered anybody. So they're like, sweet, I'm killing it so far because I haven't killed anyone. Check one for me. But don't murder is not the end-all, be-all, okay? Jesus pushes deeper, and I'm guessing everyone shifted in their seat when he said, hey, anger, just as bad. Insults, just as bad. Jesus is connecting the dots to the deeper issue behind murder. He basically says, hey, yes, murder is a horrible sin. It isn't in my kingdom, but do you know what else is sin? What drives it from the inside? That anger, that contempt, that malice towards other people. Anger when someone like gets in our way and causes a reaction from us. Contempt maybe when we label and categorize people and push them away. Or malice when we wish someone didn't exist. Jesus says, hey, it's not all about the outward action. It's about the anger inside that leads us to contempt, that leads to malice. Murder is just like the last step on this paved road of sin inside of us. And just like that, all of a sudden, hey, the Pharisees were not as righteous as they thought. I'm guessing they had a lot of anger. But Jesus is just getting started. If you go to verse 27, he keeps going, you've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you, everyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Okay, don't commit adultery. But again, Jesus goes deeper and he says, hey, lust just as condemning. Looking at someone and wishing it or thinking it just as wrong. Jesus is not just about the outward action. He says it's about the lust inside that leads us to the outward action. Anyone who even looks at someone violates the law. And again, I can see them like shifting uncomfortably in their seats because there isn't someone there who hasn't done that. We don't have time this morning to dive into every bit of what Jesus says, every part where he says, hey, you've heard it said, but I tell you. But he continues to do this. And here's what he says, hey, here's what the righteousness you think is, here's what it really is. Here's the law, here's the real point of the law. He talks about divorce because basically they had found some loophole or thing in their brain where they thought, hey, I'm actually okay according to the law to divorce my wife if she so much as burns the food. I don't care. Just divorce her. On to the next one. And Jesus is going, no, man, you are hurting people. You are setting these women up with no options. And hey, in my kingdom, that's not how we treat people. He talks about vows, right? He talks about how they had found this like loophole in vows according to the law where if they make a vow on this thing but not this thing, they don't have to keep this vow, but they do have to keep this one. And it's this weird way of distrust. And so he says, hey, people in my kingdom are trustworthy and truthful. He talks about revenge, okay? And he basically says, hey, don't get even. Instead, give more. Do good to those who wrong you. And then he ends the whole section about teaching about love. In Matthew 5, verse 43, he says, you have heard that it was said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He challenges this idea of loving only those who love you in return. Because people who like us, who are for us, who love us, easy to love them. People who are not like us, who are against us, who are not for us, easy to hate them. That just comes naturally, right? But Jesus flips it, and instead he calls those in his kingdom to a radical new kind of love. One where you meet your enemies head on with love. He ends with love, as if to like sum it all up. Love, the command later in Matthew 22 that he would say is the greatest of all the laws and commands. To love God and love others. Everything else hangs on those. Jesus is fulfilling the law. He goes beyond the outward action to the source of the action. It's not just about murder, it's about the anger inside. It's not just about adultery, it's about the lust inside. It's not just about divorce or vows or revenge or hating your enemies, it's about what's inside. And he shows us what it looks like to live in the kingdom, what it looks like to truly be righteous. And to live in this kingdom is to live with him as king and him reigning and ruling over us inside. He shows what it's like to live when he reigns and he rules. And Jesus explains, hey, the old way of doing things with that focus on the outside, that focus on the outward appearances, that focus on your actions, that's not it. Life in the kingdom is best lived when we focus on the inside, our heart. And here's what I hope we get today, if nothing else. The kingdom is about our heart. The kingdom is about our heart. It's about what's inside, not what's outside. It's about the source of our actions. It's not about outward appearances or actions, but the inner status of our heart. True righteousness. It's not just about following the rules, the letter of the law. It's about being transformed inside, a transformed heart that reflects God's character. The heart. We talk about the heart a lot. And as a kid who grew up in church, I heard about the heart over and over and over again. The amount of times I've heard the words, ask Jesus into your heart, is probably insane. And it's just, we talk about the heart so much. But hey, we're referring to more than just the physical, more than the thing that pumps blood through our body and keeps us alive, more than our emotions, more than our feelings. The heart is the core of who we are. Our inner life, our desires, our affections, our motivations, our will. In Scripture, the heart is the center of a person's being. It's where decisions are made. It's where love and devotion are formed. It's where sin begins. It's where righteousness begins. The heart determines how we live because our actions flow from our heart. Proverbs 4:23, right? Solomon writes, guard your heart above all else, for it is the source of life. It's where everything flows from, the very essence of who we are. And that is what Jesus wants, our heart, our motivation, our love. It makes me think of a classic struggle we see in some relationships or in marriages that we might see on TV or might see in a movie or experience in our own life. So let's set a scenario real quick, okay? We have a husband and a wife, and they have a home, and they have kids, and they're doing life. And let's be real, the house is messy, okay? Because life is busy and there's a lot going on. And I don't know about you, kids are gross, man, okay? My kids, no matter how many times I ask, shoes and socks are just on the floor, or food is in their room. I found like a banana peel the other week in there that had been there for way too long. Kids are gross, okay? So the house is getting bad. Sometimes it happens, okay? And honestly, let's just say in this scenario, the husband, he's not a big cleaner, okay? Not super clean, not super organized. Just doesn't notice that. He stepped over that pile of laundry like 6 times this week, didn't even bat an eye, didn't even know it was there. That's just how he rolls. And he doesn't seem to because of that, he doesn't help a ton in the area of chores inside the house. So the wife naturally ends up cleaning, picking up almost everything. That's kind of, she bears that load. And that's a lot to handle, okay? So naturally, after some time goes by, she's getting frustrated, right? She feels like she's doing this all on her own, but she does the healthy thing. And instead of harboring anger and frustration inside until she explodes, she talks to him, okay? She starts a conversation. And she tells him, hey, I'm feeling kind of overwhelmed by the state of our house. It's kind of getting to me. I feel like I'm doing a lot around the house. I don't know if you notice. I don't know if you see. I don't feel like you're helping very much. And so she asks for help because, hey, we're in this thing together. This is our home and our family. Can you help me out a little bit more? And immediately he gets like a little defensive, thinks about all the things he does for the family, about all the hours he works, about all the bills he paid, about how great the lawn looks outside, okay? But he knows, hey, that'll just start a bigger argument if I say that. So he holds that in, and he looks over, and immediately he just sees a sink full of dishes, okay? And they're gross dishes. They had Alfredo the other night. Now it's growing something. It's been there for a while. He sees the sink, and he responds with this, fine, I'll do the dishes. And he walks over, and he immediately starts on the dishes, clearly isn't happy about it. There's probably an eye roll on the way to the dishes, on the way to the sink. And then comes the classic response, okay? No, I don't want you to just do the dishes. I want you to want to do the dishes. To which everyone's like, nobody ever wants to do dishes. It's just a part of life, okay? That's a classic statement, okay? And listen, hey, if you're a guy here and you're like, oh yeah, women, we do it too, okay? We do this too. At least we do it in ways that I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about, at least during the Kingdom series. Maybe John will hit it later in the sexuality series. But we do it, but it's all of us, okay? We do this thing where, hey, like she's asking for him to help, for him to serve, for him to do something. And then when he does it that way with that attitude, she's like, no, I don't want you to do it like that. I want you to want to do it. And that happens because the attitude and the motivation it is done with. The husband then, in this scenario that I've made up that no one has ever experienced before in their life, he missed it. He missed the whole point, right? She didn't just want his actions, she wanted his affection. She doesn't just want him to act out of obligation, she wants him to act out of love. She wants what's inside to flow outside in a way that serves and sees her and helps her and shows her, hey, we're in this together, right? The basis of this scenario is, I don't just want your actions, I want your love, your affection, your heart. And while that story is, yes, kind of ridiculous, I think it can help us understand what Jesus wants us to grasp. Hey, Jesus today, learn this. Jesus doesn't want your actions, he wants your heart. So was Jesus like tossing the actions aside? Was he getting rid of the love? No, the law was crucial to the kingdom way of life. But Jesus wanted to point out how they had messed this up. They spent all day trying to act righteous, trying to follow every detail, cutting corners, finding loopholes in the law, because it was just about doing and not about being. It was about acting it out. It was about doing the chores and not loving the person. It was about following the law and not following the king. And Jesus here shows the difference between someone who's just doing what's asked out of obligation and someone whose actions are flowing from a transformed heart. He contrasts what it looks like to act out the law versus what it looks like to live in a way that he is reigning and ruling over your heart. So he goes to the source of the action, not just the action, because the wrong action is just a symptom of the problem, really. And what Jesus is making clear in his teaching is that the heart is infinitely more important than the action. Do our actions matter? Of course. And Jesus is just saying, hey, our actions are flowing from somewhere. They're flowing from the heart. So we better figure this heart thing out if we want to be a part of his kingdom. He isn't abolishing the law, he's fulfilling it by showing what it really means to live under his rule and reign. And the kingdom isn't about a list of do's and don'ts. It's not about making sure we check the right boxes. Okay, I didn't murder anyone, check. I didn't steal anything, check. I didn't boil a goat in its own milk, check. That's one of those 700 laws. It's about recognizing Jesus as the rightful king he is, letting him be king over our life, letting him rule over our heart, allowing him to transform our hearts, and then that life he describes flows from that. Life in the kingdom is not simply about the rules, it's about who is ruling. It's about transformation from the inside out. Everything happening on the outside is dependent on the inside, and we got to figure that out. And he's laying this incredibly challenging truth before us that we have to change the inside of us to enter his kingdom. And I don't know about you, it is infinitely harder for me, a human being, to change the inside rather than the outside. Follow some rules with a bad attitude and roll my eyes? Easy. Change my thoughts, my motivations, my affections, my attitudes, the way I see others? Difficult. Honestly, probably impossible. I don't think I can do that. I don't think I can live up to that. I cannot transform my own heart, and here's the thing, neither can you. And honestly, that's the best part of all this. The kingdom is not Jesus calling us to work harder and try harder and check off the to-do list that he gives. Instead, it's just about making him king. It's an invitation to let him reign and rule over our lives, to trust that he knows what's best, to trust that his way is best, to trust that he wants what's best for us, and that the king himself loves us. And then to just let him do the work. Let him transform our heart. Once he reigns, once he rules over our heart, these changed habits, this changed lifestyle begins to just flow from it. So Jesus is showing us what life would look like if he reigned and he ruled over our hearts. If the very source of our actions was a heart in love with the king. And then his way of life flows from that transformed heart. The kingdom is about our heart. So here's what I want to wrap up. As we wrap up this morning, I want to wrap up with the same 3 steps we've been talking about every single week. And I just want to tie them into our heart real quick here. The first step we've been talking about every week, just in case you haven't been here, is the first step for you might be entering his kingdom. And when it comes to our heart, it's just simply asking this question, hey, who is reigning and ruling over my life? Who is ruling my kingdom? You have a personal kingdom, I have a personal kingdom. Who am I letting reign and rule over that? Can I examine my heart? Where am I at? And honestly, some of us need to give our heart to the rightful king, whether for the very first time in your life or for the 1,000th time in your life. We tend to take it back a lot. We tend to fight for that. We give it up. We take it back. We do that a lot with our heart. But it's more about inviting Jesus. It's not about inviting Jesus to have part of our heart or part of our life or, hey, you can rule this part of my kingdom. No, it's about laying it all down because, hey, listen, Jesus wants you. He doesn't just want your actions. He wants who you are, not what you can do. He loves you. He wants what's best for you, and he's inviting you and I to be a part of his kingdom, his family, his very way of life. And the best part is you don't have to try harder. You don't have to work harder. You don't have to check boxes off a to-do list because that's not what his kingdom is. He already checked every box. He already did all the work, and now he's just inviting you and I to be a part of what he's done. to enjoy what he's finished. We just have to recognize him as the king, to believe he is who he says he is, and he did what he says he did. And let him have our heart. Let him rule and reign our kingdom. That's step one. Maybe that's your step today. Enter his kingdom. Let him have your heart. The next step we're talking about is aligning our kingdom to his. Some of us need to just let him go to work on our heart. We try to hand him our heart, and then we don't want him to change it. But we need to let the king begin to change and transform us. And honestly, it's difficult. It can be tough. It can hurt sometimes as he chips away and shapes our heart. It is slow sometimes. Man, I wish it was faster. But it's worth it. Because his kingdom, his way, is best. The way he wants to transform our heart is what's best. And our struggle as human beings, like I just said, is that after we make him king, we tend to continue to fight with him for who's in charge. But we just need to lay it down, probably more than once, okay? Just hand it to him. Let him have it. Lay it at his feet. Recognize something. We're not that great of a ruler. I don't know about you. When Dan's in charge, he runs a real loose ship, okay? It gets ugly quick. And honestly, that checks out. I make a really, really crappy king over my own heart. And so can I recognize that? And can I just give it to him and let him go to work on it? The one who wants to reign and rule it rightly. And can I watch him begin to transform me from the inside out? And it's not just a one-time choice. It's not a monthly one. It's a daily one, probably an hourly one for most of us. To submit our kingdom to his and then let him transform us and change us. And that part can be difficult to grasp sometimes. Like the achievers in the room, the people who are doers, they just want to check things, are like, okay, cool, I'm down. Tell me what to do. What's the recipe for success here? Give me my list. But it's not about doing things for Jesus. It's just about being with Jesus. I feel like we talk about this all the time as a church, and I love that, about being connected to our Savior, our Creator. John 15, right, where Jesus tells us to remain in him. Remain in me and I in you. Be with me, because to be with Jesus is to begin to be changed by Jesus. And if we want the outward parts of our life to begin to align with his kingdom, the inner parts of us have to be changed by the King, have to be with the King. John has this little saying that he'll say all the time in staff meetings, and he'll remind us of over and over again, and it's this: hey, connection over production. I don't know if you believe it or not, but our staff, the people around me, are incredible. They work incredibly hard. We work more than Sunday morning, I promise, okay? And there's a lot to do. There's a lot to change. There's a lot to work on. There's a lot to make better, and we're excited about that. And if we're not careful, we begin to just do and do and do and do without taking time to be with the source of power and life that we have in Jesus. It is significantly more important that I spend time with Jesus instead of just doing things for him. And even if I'm not connecting with him on a deep personal level, whatever I end up producing is purely from myself, my own strength, my own determination, and not from him. But honestly, sometimes it's a lot easier to just do. It's a lot easier to just produce and make something on my own than to slow down and make sure that I'm spending time connecting with Jesus. For those who are achievers in the room, we just have to focus on who Jesus wants us to become rather than the behaviors we do. To surrender more instead of trying to do more. So maybe align your kingdom to his. You need to just connect with him. You need to spend time with him. We need to reorient our days, that we're not just doing things that check the box, but something that helps us be with Jesus, something that helps us see more of who he is, to know him more, to love him more, to be shaped into who he wants us to be, to allow him to change our hearts to line up with his heart, our kingdom to his kingdom, to let him transform our heart. So we have entering the kingdom, we have aligning our kingdom to his, and lastly, the thing we've been talking about every week is bringing his kingdom here. And here's how it works. As Jesus transforms our heart, our life begins to flow from that. We live with transformed hearts in a way that brings his very kingdom, his way of life, his love, and his rule and his reign here to where we live, where we work, where we study, where we play. And when we're transformed from the inside out, we begin to live this kind of life that Jesus describes in Matthew chapter 5. And that kind of life impacts the world around you. But man, that list that Jesus said, that's a daunting list. Like, that's hardcore. That's some difficult things to live out. Our humanity, our sin nature pulls us in like the opposite direction of those things. And as I was reading this week, I came across this quote from a guy named Dallas Willard in his book, The Divine Conspiracy, and I loved it. I want to read it for you. It says this. He says, "Is it then hard to do the things with which Jesus illustrates the kingdom heart of love? It is very hard indeed if you have not been substantially transformed in the depths of your being, in the intricacies of your thoughts, feelings, assurances, and dispositions, in such a way that you are permeated with love. Once that happens, then it's not hard." It seems daunting to do all those things by our own strength, our own work ethic, our own ability. We just actually won't ever get there. But if we allow Jesus to transform our hearts from deep within, it just flows naturally. And you'll see here in this chapter, Jesus ends with love, right? A real love that flows from that transformed heart. And so, can we allow Jesus to change us and help us love the world around us in a way that he loves? Can we allow our transformed hearts, our transformed lives, to bring his kingdom to our homes, to our schools, to our jobs, and our neighborhoods? And can we give God the glory as he changes more hearts and lives and as his kingdom grows? Let's pray. God, we love you. Thank you for being a God who desires our hearts, the essence of who we are, and not just our performance, not just our actions, not just what we portray. And God, I pray that if there's someone here, Lord, that you might help them understand the grace and the compassion and the love that you have for them, that you just want them to stop trying harder and just love you, let you reign and rule. And God, I pray that someone this morning just feels the relief of that. They feel the pressure is off because you have done the work, it is finished, and you're just inviting us to join you. And so I pray that someone might understand that more today, that we might let you have our very heart, the essence of who we are, and that we might let you go to work, transforming us, changing us from the inside out. That way our life might begin to look different. No matter how slow or difficult, we might just continue to lay it at your feet and let you go to work. And I pray that you then use this group of people, use us, Lord, to bring your kingdom here to Camden County. We pray these things in your name. Amen.